This is WWE superstar Drew McIntyre, and you're listening to the WWE Podcast.
The champ is the one that everybody wants, me.
Becky Lynch is going to WrestleMania. Claymore!
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. This is my iron. You're going to acknowledge me.
What's going on, everybody, guys and girls? Welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown Review right here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I am the host of the show, Michael Ritter. You can find me on X at Michael5Ritter, on Instagram at MichaelRitter5, and also the host, or one of the hosts, of the Football Function Podcast, available on all your podcasting platforms, including wherever you're listening to this show on right now. Also available on Patreon if you prefer an ad-free listening experience. I am here to talk about the SmackDown that aired on May 17th, 2024 from Jacksonville, Florida. A little bit of a side note here, just regarding Jacksonville. They're actually building a brand new billion-dollar stadium, multi-billion-dollar stadium that's going to, be very modern in today's NFL. Whenever you talk about the stadiums that are being built on a yearly basis, look at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, AT&T Stadium in Dallas, and the reason why this makes sense is because big stadiums host WrestleManias. Whenever you look at the massive stadiums, Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, the Raiders Stadium is where WrestleMania 41 is going to be. So, obviously, if you have a big, massive playpen in your city, then it's going to be used by the biggest and best companies out there, specifically the WWE. Now, Jacksonville is a little bit of a touchy subject whenever you're talking about cities that WWE could go to for a WrestleMania, because the elephant in the room, it's pretty much the HQ for AEW, obviously. They reside in Jacksonville, if I'm not mistaken. Like their actual, the Khan family, that's where they live. They own the Jaguars, so we'll see if they ever go there and use that stadium. There's plenty of other stadiums they could choose from. In fact, they haven't even gone back to Atlanta since 2011, so I think that it's long overdue that they went to WrestleMania, or they went to Atlanta for WrestleMania. But nonetheless, I just wanted to give a shout out to Jacksonville since I saw that SmackDown was there. It's a good time to be a resident in Jacksonville, just whenever you look at what the Jaguars are doing, bringing back their throwback uniforms, and then obviously getting a brand new stadium. So yeah, great offseason to be a Jags fan and just a Jacksonville resident in general. I do apologize if you hear any side noise or any, crazy noise that might be happening during this episode. I'm not alone here in my studio, which I usually am if I'm not recording with, my former co-host John, or have any type of guest or something like that. Then I'm usually out here in my studio by myself, and that's where I was. But my stepson had a little bit of an accident, so I had to, obviously bring him out here with me. He bumped his head, and now he has a little bit of a knot. So he's got an ice pack on that bad boy, and he's just, observing all of the visuals here inside of the Function Dungeon. That's what we call this studio here. So he's kind of just joining me for the ride. He's a huge wrestling fan, so I'm sure it's killing him not to chime in and give his thoughts on what happened on SmackDown, given that he literally watched it with me earlier. So shout out to Jet that he is joining me here, and hopefully that knot on his head will go away relatively soon. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start this bad boy, and we are going to roll through this episode of the SmackDown Review. Like I said, it aired on 5/17/2024 from Jacksonville, Florida. Location breakdown brought to you by none other than DJ Kuzmo. And if I were to give this show an honest review, not, chronologically or anything like that, but just pretty much giving my overall assessment on what I thought about the show, I didn't think that this show was that monumental. I don't think that it was really moving the needle very much. It, really felt kind of quiet. Not the stadium. They had some "This Is Awesome" chants going on for the Bianca and Tiffany Stratton match, which we'll get into, and all the other action that we got. But also, just the show itself. I think that was really what didn't necessarily move me. And that just could be just this era of SmackDown that we're in right now. You know, we're kind of transitioning into a new time period with everything that we're getting on a weekly basis in terms of wrestling content. Obviously, Roman Reigns no longer in the picture, although he's getting his name dropped almost weekly. It's a new era, so we're kind of just swimming in these uncharted waters, and I'm sure that eventually we will, kind of find its level. Water will find its level, and things will kind of get back to normal. But that's not saying that the show was awful. I'm not saying that the show was, just one of the worst I've ever seen. I didn't walk away from it thinking, man, that show sucked. It just, was pretty meh, if that makes sense. But I will say the wrestling matches that took place, like the King and Queen of the Ring quarterfinals matches, they pretty much carried the show, and they're what gave it the backbone that it had pretty much for the entire 2 hours that we had here. And speaking of the Queen of the Ring, that's what started off the show, Bianca Belair versus Tiffany Stratton. Tiffany nearly wins with some heel tactics, such as, thumb to the eye, things like that, when the referee was distracted. And then, whenever she was trying to hit the prettiest moonsault ever, she gets pushed off the top rope, making her stumble and botch it. And that allows Bianca Belair to hit the KOD and advance to the semifinals in the Queen of the Ring tournament. I do think this was the right decision, having Bianca advance. I thought that we were going to get like a collision course, her and Jade Cargill eventually face off. At a tournament. I guess technically they would be in the semifinals. So maybe that's why they didn't do it, because they would have to waste that matchup on a semifinals tournament match where one of them would have to lose. Obviously, no matter when they fight, one of them is going to have to lose. But while they're tag team champions together and this early into Jade's tenure, I thought that, I guess I would have co-signed for it if we would have got Jade versus Bianca. But at the same time, I do understand the logic behind making us wait. And I'm actually glad that they did, because this is clearly like a feud in a program that could be used for a much bigger platform. Up next, we get a Cody Rhodes versus Logan Paul video package. And then, keeping things backstage, we get LA Knight leaving Nick Aldis's office whenever Logan Paul was walking in, or attempting to walk in. And then we get a little bit of a face-off, a little intense face-off. If you notice, LA Knight kept looking at Logan Paul's United States Championship. So I think that is, without a doubt, setting up a future program between those two. And man, the idea and the thoughts that come in your head of what that program could be like, having Logan Paul and LA Knight going back and forth on the microphone, what we could get on a weekly basis, and then ultimately that could be the guy who takes it off of Logan Paul at some point. Let's get that feud going through the summer. I think that could set us up pretty well, to keep the United States Championship feeling normal, or important, I guess, is what I should say, because the reason why I said normal was because at first I thought we were going to get a title versus title. I thought that we were going to have the United States Champion and the WWE Undisputed Champion, Cody Rhodes and Logan Paul, put both of their titles on the line, and then one of them was going to walk away with 2 belts, meaning, just by default, one of those belts gets put on the back burner. And, it ain't going to be the Undisputed WWE Championship. So, just by default, the United States Championship was going to get pretty much underutilized. So this prevents that from even happening. Now we get a potential juicy storyline where the United States Championship is going to be at the forefront. So I think all in all, the decision was the right decision to make, because they did kind of tease it like it was a title versus title match. The fact that they pulled back on that, I think, was the smart decision, because, there was no need. The only reason why people might be upset is because they kind of tease the idea in the first place that we could get title versus title. So yeah, whenever you change your mind, WWE Creative, whenever they change their mind, that's not the direction we're going to go, clearly some fans are going to be upset about that. But anyways, let's continue on here. They keep things backstage. Tama Tonga, I will say, this was kind of strange, just the visual and the audio that came from him. He literally sounded like Beavis and Butthead, like just the voices that he was making, just like, yeah. I don't even know, it was like walking back and forth. It was very strange, just being completely honest. And then Solo tells Paul Heyman that he and Roman quote-unquote talk all the time whenever Heyman asks if he's spoken to Roman Reigns. So that's another little twist in that whole Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, a wedge being driven between them dilemma. Maybe Paul Heyman is being pushed out of the bloodline. I highly doubt it. But this is just kind of a strange little dynamic here that I'm definitely going to be paying attention to going forward. And then we get a Kathy Kelly backstage interview. I think she's interviewing LA Knight. She's either interviewing LA Knight or Carmelo Hayes because this is pretty much where those two have a little bit of an interaction. And Carmelo loves flexing that he was a high draft pick in the WWE draft. Quite frankly, I think that he was overdrafted. That's just my personal opinion. I understand he's very talented, but I don't look at Carmelo Hayes and think, oh man, that's the next Shawn Michaels. Just given his size, the fact that he's like a smaller superstar that's supposed to be swimming with the big fish. You know, if he wants, I mean, he was the NXT champion, right? Going against the likes of Braun Breaker on NXT. So now that he's coming up to the main roster, you expect him to be going up against the top of the top whenever you're talking about the food chain of all the wrestlers on SmackDown. Just for some reason, Carmelo Hayes just doesn't stand out to me like that. And, you know, I expect to be proven wrong. That's usually what happens in these situations. He ends up growing on me, and I'm like, yeah, this dude has it. He's had it the whole time, and I just couldn't see it. But I do feel like he's a little bit, you know, maybe gassing himself up a little bit too much. And you got to be careful when you're gassing yourself up, just given what's been going around on the internet here lately. But nonetheless, I think LA Knight dunks on him here because he brings up him being a high draft pick. And LA Knight says, that's funny, like, because I've always thought of myself a little bit like Tom Brady, who was a 6th-round draft pick, who was the number 1 overall pick the year Tom Brady was drafted. He says nobody cares. So, yeah, pretty much it doesn't matter where you get drafted. It's all about what you do after you get drafted. And I feel like that was a good point for LA Knight to maybe shut up Carmelo Hayes about just hyping up the, you know, I was drafted 1st overall, whatever. Like, I'll be honest, as a true SmackDown fan, someone who covers this show and has been very biased to the SmackDown brand for the better part of 4 years now, I was a little bit disappointed when we drafted him so high. I was like, oh man, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, I would have much rather had Braun Breaker, just being completely honest, if we're talking about the NXT guys. So that's kind of where I stand whenever talking about Carmelo Hayes. But ultimately, yes, you know, I want everybody to succeed and have as much success as possible. So I do want him to thrive, but, you know, I need to see more than just a talented in-ring performer. Look at Ricochet. Ricochet is a very talented in-ring performer, but nobody is going to throw him in the main event picture and think, ooh, Ricochet has a chance. Now, I know it's almost like apples to oranges comparing Carmelo Hayes and Ricochet, but I'm just trying to use an example where there is a total package aspect that has to come into effect whenever you're pushing a guy to the top. Moving on here in the show, we get another King of the Ring qualifiers match. Or not qualifiers, this is a quarterfinals match. So pardon me. Tama Tonga versus LA Knight. Tama Tonga advances to the next round. Obviously, this was a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought LA Knight was going to win this match, but there was a little bit of a distraction by Solo Sikoa. So Tama Tonga will be representing Beavis and Butthead in the semifinals of the King of the Ring tournament. Let's see here. This leads to backstage where Carmelo Hayes is pretty much rubbing it in LA Knight's face backstage. They pretty much have to be separated. So LA Knight's just setting up feuds, all, you know, one for down the line 3 months from now, one for next week, probably with Carmelo Hayes. You could just tell that he's not really worried about making enemies at this point in his career. So Carmelo Hayes versus LA Knight will likely be happening very, very soon. And then this is where we get that champion versus champion contract signing. And this is kind of where we all got a little bit thrown for a loop. Because like I said, it was teased that we were going to have a United States champion versus WWE Undisputed Champion winner-take-all match. And I had expressed a little bit of concern with that. Like, I don't know if that's the right decision, you know, making one of these guys, Logan Paul or Cody Rhodes, lose at this point where they both are. Like, neither one of these guys can take a loss. I just think that they're both, you know, with a jetpack strapped to their back, heading to the moon right now. So really wouldn't have made a lot of sense to put both titles on one guy. So I think that the huge problem here is really just that, you know, obviously that they teased us that we were going to get it, and then ultimately they, you know, changed their mind in the last minute. But sometimes the smart and right decision isn't always the most popular. But it does suck for Cody Rhodes, now with the only person with something to lose in this matchup. And I wanted to quote Shaquille Majori, obviously from CBS Sports, because he had a pretty nice perspective on this whole Logan Paul weasels out of the champ versus champ stipulation. So here we go. SmackDown promised a contract signing for a match staking the undisputed WWE and the United States Championships. Paul had other plans for the King and Queen of the Ring main event. The social media influencers shook up the match in an unpleasant way. Paul and his lawyer presented Aldis with a revised contract stipulating that only Rhodes' championship would be at stake. Aldis contested, but Rhodes agreed to sign the amended contract, and then a war of words preceded a short brawl. Rhodes clotheslined Paul out of the ring before powerbombing a member of his entourage through a table. And then Shaquille goes on to give his own thoughts by saying, I have mixed feelings about the updated champ versus champ match. It's wise to keep both titles in rotation by not crowning a double champ, but why bother teasing it in the first place? It's cheap heat for Paul, but he's already detestable. You're probably more annoyed with the creative team than Paul if you know professional wrestling is scripted. The change also crushed any minuscule doubt about the outcome. Rhodes is making another successful title defense. The segment itself was well executed, but we need more interesting storyline for Rhodes soon. The chase was wonderful, but his heroic title reign runs the risk of growing stale quickly. After all, we just saw a contract signing between Rhodes and Styles a few weeks ago. Not the most inspired angle, and I have to say that that's pretty much in lockstep with how I feel about this whole thing. I was opposed at first to the champ versus champ dynamic. I'm glad they made the switch, but I do kind of wonder, like, all right, like now you kind of just put yourself in a little bit of a pickle here where I'm not really sure how, your fan base is going to feel about that. So we'll kind of just, I guess, let that marinate a little bit and move on to another Queen of the Ring qualifiers match. Nia Jax versus Jade Cargill. This one was pretty funny, obviously, whenever you factor in the whole Jade Cargill's daughter angle that was done in the match. Whenever Nia said, your mom sucks. Clearly, Jade Cargill doesn't suck, but you have to admit, I'm someone that, I've never really been a Nia Jax fan, especially in the ring. But here lately, I've admitted that she's doing some of her best work. And whenever you do stuff like this, that's just comedic gold. And you're really not even trying to. You're just pretty much being yourself. Yeah, that definitely gave me a little bit of a kick here. But anyways, Nia Jax does win this match because of a disqualification. After Cargill hit Jax with a steel chair, Jax swung with the chair first, but Cargill caught it and then delivered the final blow. So Nia Jax advances to the semifinals of the Queen of the Ring tournament. And I was a little bit shocked, but I'm glad, because this is another thing that's like, were they really going to put Bianca and Jade Cargill on a collision course and have their big, blow-off match be in the semifinals? No, people want to see this happen at a WrestleMania. They want to see this face-off at the Royal Rumble again or something like that. I don't really think that the semifinals of a Queen of the Ring tournament is where you finally do this Bianca versus Jade match. So the right decision was made here, although it may not be the most popular one, which is nothing that we're really, not used to at this point. But we do get another match here, a tag team match. DIY, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa defeat Legado del Fantasma, which is Angel Garza and Humberto Carrillo, after hitting Meet in the Middle on Humberto. So a nice decisive victory there for DIY. And one question I have is, where does AJ Styles go from here? I know this is kind of a random, quick right turn, but that's what I have here in my notes as the next thing to talk about, is where does AJ Styles go from here? And he even mentions it, talking about Leon France. That meant a lot to him. The fact that he's referenced it so much and, even acknowledged it on social media, that he was kind of disappointed that he was the quote-unquote heel in that matchup with Cody Rhodes, because he wanted to be embraced fully by the crowd and be able to probably get the win. But I'm glad that AJ Styles got a moment like that. Just want to give another shout out to the France crowd for doing what they did and making many wrestlers, even weeks later, still talk about it. So you did your job, if that's what we're talking about. But what is next for AJ Styles? I personally, I have no idea. I feel like he pretty much turned his back on the OC whenever he came back as this heel version of himself. So he is a little bit of a lone wolf. He was, hell-bent on getting revenge on the Bloodline, which ended up coinciding with a feud with LA Knight that led to WrestleMania. And now we're just wondering what's next for the guy. And he's already pretty much been pretty vocal, like, hey, I'm not going to wrestle forever. So this is, the back nine. I'm well on the back nine. I've only got a few holes left. So we'll see what he does with it. Just, I kind of was wondering. That was more of a question for you guys, more than I have, some groundbreaking thoughts on it. I'm curious. What's next for AJ Styles? Because I feel like the potential is there. And obviously, he's already done pretty much everything under the moon. He's a Hall of Famer walking right now. So, he's already gone for the big belt, and he wasn't able to do it. I don't think he's ever going to be the one to take the title off of Cody Rhodes. But, the World Heavyweight Championship's over on Monday Night Raw, and I feel like people are already in line for that one. So what are you going to do with AJ Styles? Just put him in something meaningful. Give him a grudge match, maybe like a fantasy match if somebody comes back that hasn't been around for a while. I don't really know, but I'm curious what other people think about what the future holds for AJ Styles. Up next here in the show is already the main event, another King of the Ring quarterfinals match, Randy Orton versus Carmelo Hayes. And they did do a pretty good job making Carmelo Hayes look strong. There were some good spots in this match by Randy Orton where he was really selling that leg injury. I think it might have been his knee. Just doing a great job. He's textbook at selling an injury in a match. And this is a good spot where, kind of like I was saying earlier, in the ring, there's no doubt Carmelo Hayes can bring it. But ultimately, they still gave the win to the veteran, someone who's 40 years old plus, so I totally, I would have given the win to Randy Orton too, but it just kind of goes to show, man, you were the first round draft pick, right? And you just lost in the quarterfinals? You didn't even make the semifinals of this tournament, and we're supposed to believe that you're him, HIM? Yeah, I'm not really buying that at this point. But the Bloodline do come out after Randy Orton's win just to pretty much, try to put some fear into the heart of Randy Orton and I guess really anybody else on the SmackDown roster, although it's not really working. There were more comments about Solo's clothes that he was wearing than, anything the Bloodline was doing. Anytime Roman Reigns' name gets dropped, that's really the only time a Bloodline segment actually has juice nowadays. So they're kind of, I don't want to say that they're NWOing the Bloodline by just bringing all these new people in and having it be, such a different dynamic. But I got to be honest, it just doesn't feel the same. The Bloodline has lost its luster. And I guess that's just part of losing so many meaningful members. You lose the Usos, Sami Zayn, obviously Roman Reigns is gone. Now all that's left is Solo Sikoa, the guy that can't even cut a promo. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just not really as invested in the Bloodline as I once was, and that is unfortunate to say. And that is how SmackDown ended up going off of the air. But as I mentioned earlier, I brought my stepson out here because he had bumped his head and he had some ice on it. And he was kind of just sitting down here so I could still knock out this show, but also, give some supervision because, I don't want him to take a nap or anything like that after he just bumped his head on a fireplace. So I did bring him out here, and I will, preface this by saying, I've already talked about him a lot on this show and, kind of what we've done over the past year or so, like going to SmackDown and things like that. And him being such a huge, wrestling fan, playing with wrestlers. At 6 years old, 100%, he's more hardcore of a fan than I was at 6 years old. This dude loves wrestling. Some of you older fans might actually remember the movie Ready to Rumble. Well, he's already watched that movie twice today, and it's 4:37 p.m. And he watched SmackDown with me. So that's a lot of wrestling content that this kid takes in. And he's asked me so many times, can I come out there whenever you're recording your podcast? Can I go out there whenever you're talking about SmackDown and things like that? And I've always said, you'll get bored. It's a very quiet setting. You can't talk. You can't make a lot of noise. I feel like you would get bored. You would like hearing, the things that we're talking about because we're talking about wrestling and you love wrestling. But I've always said that, I don't think that he would have fun out here. But because he had to sit out here with me for this episode of SmackDown or the SmackDown review, I went ahead and pulled him up because, we have a couple microphones in here. This is believe it or not, this is a pretty professional studio that we're in right now. And I have him sitting here next to me, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. I'm going to let him make his SmackDown review debut because, like I said, he's a massive wrestling fan. So I'm going to let him voice some opinions here, and we're just going to start it off very simple. Jet, who's your favorite wrestler right now?
Cody Rhodes.
Cody Rhodes is your favorite?
Yep.
Why is he your favorite?
Because I like when he does the crossroads. At WrestleMania, he did 3 crossroads. Then he won the WWE Universal Champion. So I don't know what to say.
So that's your favorite? You like when you like his entrance song as well?
Yeah.
So who's your favorite girl wrestler?
Jade Cargill.
Jade Cargill. I didn't expect you to say that. I've heard you say other names in the past whenever, we've talked about.
And my other one is Asuka and Bailey. And Becky Lynch.
Okay, Becky Lynch. That's another good one. So what show do you like more? Are you more of a Raw guy or are you more of a SmackDown guy?
A SmackDown guy.
SmackDown guy, huh? Is it because I do the SmackDown review and you have to watch it with me all the time?
Actually, I'm a Raw guy.
So you're a Raw guy changing up. All right. Well, this is going to be your last appearance here on the SmackDown review for that one, bud. I'm just joking, obviously. But so, Jet, what do you think about the Cody Rhodes and Logan Paul thing? Who are you rooting for? Because I know you like Logan Paul as well. So are you, obviously you just said Cody Rhodes is your favorite. So I'm assuming you want him to win. But are you a little bit torn in this match?
I want someone to win at WrestleMania. It's Cody Rhodes.
All right. Well, Jet, thank you so much for giving your thoughts and making your opinion or your appearance here, your debut on the SmackDown review. Guys, I wanted to remind you he is 6 years old if you couldn't tell there. But yeah, obviously he loves wrestling, so we will probably go, do some type of, WWE 2K24. I literally just had to get the ECW Punk pack, which is just, some ECW legends such as CM Punk, Terry Funk, the Dudley Boys. I know that Jet likes the Dudley Boys because obviously Devon Dudley, was he the special guest referee at WrestleMania?
And I like the Dudley Boys because Bubba Ray Dudley and his partner, he was at WrestleMania. He was the ref. I was completely shocked. I was laughing when he put his glasses on.
All right, interesting perspective there from Jet. Thank you so much for giving your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for listening. That does do it. I apologize that this was a little bit of a, sped through episode. Like I said, this episode of SmackDown wasn't the best. So I do what I can here. Whenever they give me chicken, I'm trying to make some chicken salad. And then whenever you factor in just the parenting duties, I probably would have been able to give a little bit more depth into this, but I'm having a side eye look over to my shoulder every 2 seconds to make sure he's not touching anything or going to fall out of his chair and hit his head again or something like that. So I do apologize for that, but I hope you guys still enjoyed the show. Hopefully you will come back next week and listen to the 197th episode of the SmackDown review here from me, Michael Ritter. And then obviously, Queen and King of the Ring is happening next week on May 25th. One of the last few pay-per-views that are going to be on Saturday. As far as I have heard, I believe that WWE is going back to Sunday pay-per-views because, the whole TKO merger. UFC wants to have their events on Saturday nights and, not take away the viewing of the WWE fan base or whatever. I'm not really sure, but they want to do the Power Slap on Friday. So screw SmackDown, I guess, right? The UFC pay-per-views on Saturday, and then obviously the WWE pay-per-views on Sunday, which I'm not opposed to, a nice Sunday pay-per-view. That's what I'm used to, but I guess at this point, I'm still going to watch no matter what. But one more time, guys, thank you so much. Definitely, if you feel inclined to do so, go check out the Football Function podcast. We are growing. It's a fun community. It's a sports community, not really just football, although it's very football-centric, probably 97% football talk. But you will get some other sports occasionally, especially since the NBA playoffs. We definitely like to touch on some, NBA talk, some basketball talk. The Boston Celtics just, advanced to the Eastern Conference Final, and longtime listeners know that I am a pretty big Boston Celtics fan, so thankfully they are back in the Eastern Conference Finals for the third straight year. Hopefully this season will have a different ending, but, you can only hope, and that's definitely what I'm doing right now. But I will talk to you guys very, very soon. 6 short days to be exact. So until then, I hope you guys all have a phenomenal weekend. Have a safe and productive week. Walk passionately in the direction of your dreams, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.